My name is Rob Trice. I'm pleased to be your moderator today. I'm going to set up this amazing panel looking at the role of open source for Agrifood. And let me just start off with a couple slides here just to set the stage. So actually, wait, first, let's just do a quick roll call, name, affiliation, maybe just a sentence on what you do.
Yeah.
Brendan?
So, hi everyone, I'm Brendan Dowdle. I'm the CEO of FarmNG. We are a farm robotics company, building robotics platforms to support in introducing autonomy and precision into laborious contexts. Based in Watsonville, so 20 minutes down the road.
My name is Colleen Josephson. I'm a faculty member here at UC Santa Cruz, and I'm also a faculty affiliate at OSRE. And I do a lot of work at the intersection of open source and agriculture.
Good morning. My name is Colin, Rinta, Stewart. I'm an agriculturalist and co-founded the Farmer and Marketplace manufacturing.
Good afternoon, Zabrocki. We provide strategic advice and then back it up with tactical, practical execution that need to get it done. And happy to see you.
Excellent. So I'm Rob Trice. I founded two organizations that look at promoting the role of information technology in food and agriculture. One is called the Mix and Bowl that connects IT, food, and ag innovators for thought and action leadership, and Better Food Ventures that invest in companies applying digital technology across the food and ag value chains for positive impact now. And FarmNG is one of our portfolio companies. One of the challenges that we have in food and agriculture is, if you think about a step function of digital innovation, a lot of farmers and even the chefs in food production, they're still in the early stages of just digitizing their information. So if we kind of look at this, what we're trying to look at, what happened, why did it happen, what do I need to change, and then how do I optimize it? So before we can kind of drop into the deep end of the pool for AI and automation, we've got to get the appropriate systems in place to make all that happen. So there's record keeping, digital management systems, ERP, and analytics and optimization system. Most farmers in the world are just in the process of digitizing their information. Very quickly, if you look at this TSC Trust in Food survey from 2021, 62% of farmers are not using any software product. American farmers are not using any software product. 46 are reliant on paper. And just on the food side down here, there's a survey of 800 food companies. 10 do not have any data on where their ingredients come from. 27 can trace a product back to their country of origin, but only 8% can trace their origin down to the farm level. That's usually in produce and food safety. We've got some unique challenges in agri-food. It's 5 to 10% of the world's economy, but we've got to align a lot of actors in the system to make change happen. The way that we grow food and produce, and deliver food varies massively across the country, California, the globe. We get a slow feedback loop. They talk about a farmer has 40 seasons to make changes. We have embedded cultural change, so it's hard to make that change happen. Government involvement protects markets and skews incentives. Government involvement also plays a role in safety, which is pretty important, which can slow innovation. And we have low margins that exist across the food and ag value chain. So when thinking about venture capital, we should have had a big old party because we went from about $3 billion in 2013 to $53 billion in 2021. And then we crashed and burned. We got a hangover. Now last year we were at 16 billion. And what do we get from all that? This is kind of the breakdown of where it went. The net is we got faster food delivery and Beyond Burger. So my whole message here is that we need new innovation models for agri-food. This smart guy said we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. And I keep thinking about this 1968 Jerry Lewis movie called Don't Raise the Bridge, Lower the River. So we threw a bunch of money. We raised the bridge, trying to make things happen. We need new innovation models for agri-food. And that's where I'm looking at things like open source, where we can actually lower the river. And with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Brendan. Why don't you go first? And I'll stop sharing.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rob. Thanks for that setup here. So, as I mentioned, my name is Brendan Dowdle. I'm the CEO of Farm.G. We are building a robotics platform for agriculture. Overall, our thesis is that if we can build a platform that makes it easy for farmers, for developers, for researchers, for academia, to essentially get a mobile base with autonomy and AI capabilities built in and have that be out of the box, that it will create opportunities for innovation across the entire kind of growing or set of growing tasks that our farmers experience. The agricultural market overall is not monolithic. We have lots of different crops, we have lots of different applications, and the technology stack that's required in order to solve for all of those things very significant. And so we can kind of bite off a foundational piece of that technology stack and make it open and easy for our customers, developer partners to use. We feel that would put us in a position to create value in this space, but also spur innovation across for our farmers and across like the different types of tasks that are required to grow our food. And so essentially what we have is a robotic platform. We call it the Amiga. This was named by one of our customers. It's the friendly robot that supports in these more manual, laborious tasks on a farm. And the key with the Amiga is that we want to make something that's low cost, that provides ROI today to farmers, even in what we call dumb modes. But it then enables farmers to have essentially a GPU-powered computer on the farm that then will automate or support in the automation or autonomy of future tasks. And the key elements of the Amiga are the robot itself, the mobile base. It's our kind of what we call the brain. It's the a kind of field-hardened GPU computer that powers the Amiga, powers the autonomy within the Amiga, navigation, also powers essentially action on the farm. And then we have we've spent a lot of time building out our SDKs and APIs in a way to make it easy to leverage kind of the different layers of the technology stack of the Amiga to a variety of purposes. Here's a short video of to show kind of the modularity, the openness of the Amiga. So what we're really focused on again is that foundational platform. And that can then be used from anything from seeding to harvesting and really kind of everything in between. And the goal here is to make something that's customizable, modular, and really, really simple to use. We are currently our customers currently span from growers themselves who actually, surprisingly, or not surprisingly, maybe to this group, are fairly sophisticated. They have a lot of ability to build innovative solutions. They know their workflows really well. We work with a lot of academic institutions, and I'll talk about our challenge. And this is kind of our, I think part of the reason you invited me here is, we really are trying to spur a developer community to build solutions on top of them. Actually, Dehan is one of our customers and who is an active user of the Amiga. There's a robot just up the hill here. And then, we actually also support with researchers to kind of build, help supporting maybe lowering the river within the agricultural space. And I'll give an example of a customer that we work with here, that is, in that vein. And so, what is the key kind of elements of the platform, and why are we or why are kind of this developer community kind of centered around the Amiga? Well, we've kind of created really kind of two tiers to leverage the Amiga on the software side. We have our own operating system and app ecosystem. So this is, makes it very easy essentially for, developers to kind of build within our operating system itself. There's a very elegant user experience. It's something that is easy for customers to use. And then, that ultimately allows, apps to be developed that can serve multiple purposes. And then we have a set of SDKs and APIs that are open. We don't charge for them. And this is kind of the thesis with PharmNG. We really want to spur that innovation on top of that Amiga. And that has resulted in a pretty significant developer community that are building solutions around the Amiga. Right now we have about 30 plus universities and research institutions that have purchased more than one Amiga, and they're building solutions anywhere from, as I said, seeding to harvesting and a lot of things in between. So here's kind of just a mirage of pictures here of different customers and the types of applications that are being built on top of this platform. As it relates to kind of where we see the challenges in spurring development, maybe introducing AI into the agricultural markets, it's around access to one, the form factor to and the compute on the field that allows a farmer to essentially leverage AI. So we're looking to solve for that. But then number two, it's then access to data. And so this is where we see big challenges, even for our development on the autonomy and navigation side, is that we spend a lot of time thinking about how do we acquire data cheaply so we can train our algorithms to then perform tasks on the farm. We also have customers and partners that are also solving this problem. And so one of those customers is the USDA or the PSA, or Precision Sustainable Agricultural Group over at NC State. They are using our Amiga, and as you can see on the bottom right here, they are using the Amiga with a gantry system and some image sensors here to essentially create a catalog of data for different crop types that they're going to make available in an open source, so that we can start to build kind of a data catalog where machine learning algorithms, AI can start to kind of be fine-tuned and be practical for making decisions on farms. This is where we see kind of the big opportunity is how do we create these data sets? How do we enable those data sets and make them available to the developer community that then can build solutions on top of those data sets. And that's a hard problem to solve. We look at what OpenAI has done with ChatGPT. They have the luxury of having the entire internet of text to train their solutions on. Image data is much more difficult to gather, and then even more difficult to put in a structured format that then allows for training to occur on it. And so this is going to be a big problem. The reason that kind of the VLMs, if you will, the visual learning models, are not as mature as the LLMs, the language models, is because of access to data, and that's particularly prevalent in our farming communities here. So we're as PharmNG, this is one of the areas that we're helping to try to support. Essentially build that platform that also enables data acquisition in a simpler, cheaper way. Working with partners to then make that data available for developer communities that can build solutions, and hopefully they build them on top of the Amiga. So that's a little bit about PharmNG, and excited to be here.
We talked about the Farm Robotics Challenge.
Yeah. I mentioned that there was 30 plus universities that we work with today that are customers of ours. They work with a program that we have co-sponsored with the UCANR. Where
what is ANR?
The
Agricultural
Natural Resources, which is a UC overlay across all the UC schools. What the Farm Robotics Challenge is essentially building applications that provide value and ROI to farmers. And so we, each year there's about 30 teams that participate in the challenge. They get access to an Amiga, and the prompt is, work with a farmer. You have to have a farmer that they're working with to develop a solution, a robotic solution that provides tangible ROI for that farmer. And then there's prizes at the end of the challenge. We're actually presenting those winners at FIRA, which will be in a couple of weeks up in Woodlands. And there's been a whole number of really great, I don't think I have them here, but really great applications that have been built on top of that. Some of those student groups have formed their own companies and are building essentially autonomy capabilities for farmers, leveraging the Amiga as the foundational robot. So I guess in summary here, where we see the challenges in certainly the ag robotics space is that there is the tech stack to solve each of these individual applications is so significant that if you can divide up that tech stack and bite off a chunk of it and make it available in a low cost, open way, it just enables the more focus, or the R&D to be more focused on the applications that actually provide real ROI for farmers. And that's why we're here. That's our mission and vision, and where we see the opportunity in the ag robotics space.
Excellent. Then will you stop sharing, and then Colleen, you want to light up, and then Colleen, I think you would come over here.
Yeah, I understand. It's been a lot instead of.
And I think you were involved. UC Santa Cruz brought home the gold in the Farm Robotic Challenge last year for the small.
I was not Dejan.
Dejan was. All right. So for the small farm.
Yeah, we got award for application for small for BD for small farms. So the award was a small farm of Trice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. So thank you, everybody. My name again is Colleen Josephson, and I'm a faculty member here at UC Santa Cruz. And I just talk a little bit about some of the research that we do that leverages and contributes to that open source agri-food ecosystem. So agriculture, it's grappling with the dual challenges of having both a significant carbon footprint, but also the pressing need to increase productivity to meet the projected global demand. Environmental sensing, where you put sensors outdoors and take measurements like soil moisture or temperature, and then transmit those to a decision center to try and make decisions, that has enormous potential for really contributing positively to that ecosystem. So, for example, there are decades of studies showing that using soil moisture sensors can lead to 20 to 50% reduction in water consumption while maintaining, or even in some cases, increasing crop yields. But despite these benefits, the vast majority of farms in the US have not yet adopted these technologies. One of the biggest challenges to the wider adoption of these environmental sensing technologies is the lack of ubiquitous power infrastructure. You can't just plug electronics into the dirt. But what if you could? That's one of the problems that my research group is working on. My background is broadly in the area of wireless sensing and communications, with a particular focus on enabling sustainable technologies. Every single one of our research projects here at Santa Cruz have been open source, and we've built upon the backs of many previous open source projects to get our work to the point that it's at. So over the next few slides, I'm going to give you a brief overview of some of the work that we do and how we think it can advance open, sustainable, and productive agriculture. So fundamental to much of our work is something called RF backscatter. So I think this might be a little small for some people in the back, so try and gesture. But basically, this is the concept that if you have an electromagnetic wave, every portion of it gets reflected back to where it came from. this backscattering phenomenon is the principle behind radars and lidars, which might be mounted to the Amiga platform for some of the agricultural sensing you want to do. But this backscatter can also be used for communication. So antennas are very good at re-radiating incident RF. And if you change the impedance of the antenna, you can change the nature of the reflected RF. This, in essence, gives us zeros and ones. So now we have a communication link. With that, we can use that technology to actually sense soil moisture completely passively. So if you have an underground reflective tag, if you have a radar above the surface, if you beam radar frames to the underground tag and you have some idea of the distance that the tag is buried underground, the key to this is that RF travels more slowly through wet soil than dry. So if you're able to time how long it took to propagate through the soil and reflect back up to the radar, you now have some idea of what the soil moisture measurement is. So if we put everything together, we used a commodity ultra wideband radar, and that radar had an open source development SDK, which we relied on heavily. And we basically designed this tag that we buried at a known depth, and we used the radar to measure the time of flight that it takes to reach the tag. And you can use some pretty simple algebra from there to try and infer soil moisture. And it turns out that we were able to measure the soil moisture with comparable accuracy to state-of-the-art commercial sensors, but at a projected cost of just a few dollars per measurement point. And the entire design of our system, and including the hardware and the software, is open source and available for anybody to go take a look. So we've had some people replicating it, and some senior design projects at different schools have started taking a look at it. But one thing that concerns us about this is, what about batteries? So right now, this underground tag has batteries. This passive RF communication idea, it's actually something that's every day. Those ID badges you have, those are RFID, which is a form of backscatter communication. Those badges are able to harvest their energy from the ambient RF because you kind of hold them up and the badge reader's right there. But the challenge with it being underground is you're going to have really high loss. So you can't harvest energy from RF the same. So our initial prototypes use chemical batteries, but that's not ideal because those tend to run out over time. There's environmental implications, and all of that kind of adds to the labor that farmers have to consider. You don't want to dig these things up and go and replace them. So this is where one possible solution comes in, called dirt batteries. These devices are more formally known as microbial fuel cells, and they leverage the behavior of a specific type of bacteria in the soil known as exoelectrogens. These microbes, as part of their natural digestion processes, produce a spare external electron as a byproduct of their normal respiration activities. That's where the name exoelectrogen comes in. And it turns out if you place an electron acceptor in the soil, in this case electrodes, and place a load in between the electrodes, they start to whisk away these extra electrons. And in essence, you've started harvesting energy from these naturally occurring microbes in the ground. So with this in mind, kind of our overall vision is that we can transition away from a traditional sensing paradigm and a more mobile and micro-friendly paradigm. So in the hopes of making sensing more sustainable and accessible. But there are a bunch of interesting research challenges that are we need to overcome to make this vision a reality. So one thing that we suggest is for sensing soil moisture at scale, we could attach a mobile reader to a drone that goes around and scans them above the ground. But drones are easier said than done. Even though they're one of the fastest growing technologies in agriculture, there's still the very real issue of limited payloads and battery lifetimes and regulatory hurdles. When you consider the fact that the average farm in the US is 445 acres, and the average drone battery lifetime is 20 to 45 minutes if you have a modest payload, This means that you can realistically only cover a portion of a farm during a flight if you're stopping to do sensor readings. So one of the questions that we're trying to answer here at Santa Cruz is, given limited battery lifetimes, how can you maximize the information density of your flight path? Another set of open challenges focuses on how can we effectively work with microbial fuel cells. So we're one of the first groups of people, to my knowledge, to deploy soil microbial fuel cells outdoors and collect data. This is a set of data from one of our early deployments. And one of the interesting aspects that you might not be able to see in the back is it's not constant. You're seeing all these kind of sinusoidal waves and peaks and dips. And this is the microbial fuel cell responding to changes in the environment. So over here, this is going up and down due to sunrise and sunset. The temperature in the ground is changing the power production. On this one down here, you see occasional higher spikes. That's when the drip irrigation turned on the farm. So how do we effectively use this type of power source? Can we leverage these somewhat predictable behaviors like the daylight sunlight fluctuations? And could the microbial fuel cells potentially be used as sensors themselves? We found that in addition to responding to moisture content and temperature, we've also discovered that the fuel cells appear to produce less energy when the soil has a reduced amount of soil organic carbon. We currently have no in-ground way to measure soil organic carbon. Basically, the state of the art is going out and taking a manual sample and sending it to the lab. So could we do something called sensor fusion, where we pair the data collected from these fuel cells with traditional sensor data and kind of infer information that's beyond the sum of its parts? But the challenge with this sort of kind of pie in the sky vision is that exploring these questions requires collecting a bigger data set of microbial fuel cell behavior. And as you're probably aware from the AI talks earlier, and some of what Rob hinted at, exploring these questions requires a expensive, good data set, and this can be time consuming and out of reach. So our earliest data sets were collected using an IoT power profiling platform called Rocket Logger, and it's very accurate, but also quite expensive, $1,500 per unit commercially. And it can only monitor 2 fuel cells at a time. So this was becoming a pretty major bottleneck in obtaining data out in the field. So to that end, we've been designing a low-cost, low-power sensor board that enables more affordable collection of our data sets. So our boards cost less than $50 and maintain the same power measurement accuracy, but while consuming less power and at a fraction of the cost. Like all of our research, it's fully open source, and it's also been in some form the topic of a UCSC open source summer research experience for 3 years running, and hopefully again. Though this board was created with microbial fuel cells in mind, it can also act as a general purpose data logger. And there are other existing use cases that we've experienced. It's been used to support the design and deployment of a novel leaf wetness sensor here at Santa Cruz. It's been used towards the validation of UAV-driven sensor network interrogation schemes. And it's also part of a preliminary set of work towards the creation of a community-based wireless irrigation system for Santa Cruz and Monterey Bay area small farmers. So with that, I kind of say that this work is to be continued, and thank you all for giving me some time to share our.
Thank you. Well, you want to come on up? Great. Sounds like Colleen needs to talk to you about a hot swappable e-bike battery platform that you had.
Yeah.
Cool.
Morning. Well, some microbial fuel cells, but it's moving forward. It's really cool. Really grateful to be here amongst you, and thanks for UCSC for throwing this event. I just want to take the time to, we're talking about open source innovation. And I just want to take the time to acknowledge the territory that we're on. We're on the unceded territory of the Wasawasa speaking Yupi tribe. On the left is a diagram or a map of all the different dialects and languages, or some of the dialects and languages that have been here since time immemorial. I'm of the belief that there's a way to shortcut a lot of this work is to support a lot of indigenous knowledge in agriculture, because the reason why this territory is so beautiful and so tended for so long was indigenous management tradition. So there's a plug for that, and the Algonquin tribal band and the land trust are doing incredible work to that end. Just a little bit of background about me. Second. A little background about me. I have a background in agricultural science and economics. I worked for Washington State University as an agricultural extension program agent, doing helping small farms find markets and kind of crop plan. And I've grown organic grains, row crops, pastured pigs, orchard and perennial crops. Right now, that's mostly a pear orchard in the Salish Sea. Through an experience growing organic grains, I had a really hard time finding a relatively small amount of certified organic wheat. We're growing about 100 acres. This particular kind of red wheat actually developed for the Chipotle company to develop a soft white wheat to reduce fillers and dough conditioners. They approached WSU Bread Lab, Steve Jones, which is now the only certified organic or only wheat facility breeding for certified organic. So through that process, I started looking really into what are the traditional avenues to find certified organic seeds and foods and goods. About that time, the USDA for the first time released a database of all the certified organic farms and businesses across the world. It's called the Organic Integrity Database. We took that data and realized it was really difficult to navigate. The UX was bad, and our kind of main focus is looking at how do we preserve and promote autonomy, financial autonomy across the value chain in agriculture. So that's manifested in a structure of a cooperative, which obviously is nothing new in agriculture. But what is new is the creation of a cooperative structure called the Limited Cooperative Association. It was actually created in 2012 in Colorado to align folks in the ethanol value chain. So we needed a way to make sure corn growers, ethanol distributors, and ultimately refineries to get remunerated for their contributions. So it's the first time ever where cooperatives take or formally take outside investment structure in addition to their member owner classes. So our structure is that Market.Organic is there's kind of a co-ops model, and because the database is 50,000 people across farms and businesses across 180 countries, we're procedurally incorporating different cooperatives in different nation states, because right now under cooperative law, you can't have a global co-op that issues dividends or distributions to say a Uganda national compared to US national. A few things that we're trying to really address, and there's a lot of these, so we can go into it later. But so in general, the current methods of digitizing ag data don't support farmer autonomy, especially with respect to financial sovereignty and engaging in the marketplace. Farmers and co-ops, especially in the organic industry, need access to markets without overexposed data, because if they overexpose data, it opens themselves up to, I guess you could say, attack vectors or needling down by big buyers or big multinationals. And then contract farming opportunities are not visible. And contract farming is pretty simple and quite ubiquitous, where it's, if I'm looking to grow or produce or process a bunch of flour, maybe wheat flour, I'll go to a farmer or a co-op and say, hey, can I buy 10,000 pounds over 3 years for whatever amount of money? So the Federation and cooperatives in general, we're trying to help organic farms, businesses, and co-ops find markets. We're building zero knowledge contract making tools for certified organic ag. So that's my open source plug. We're creating standards for that. And really importantly, we're providing farmers with ownership over digital market infrastructure and data. That's ultimately important because the remnants of our, if you call it an agricultural system, are from banana republics. And the Royal Niger Company, which turned into modern state Nigeria, arguably was now Unilever. So we have these systems of control rooted in conquest that are not equitable, to say the least. So we've released it's www.Market.Organic. You can play with it now. It's not fully feature rich, but it's 50,000 certified organic farms and businesses across the world. That really simply we allow them to verify their profiles and then make listings of the goods they have available for sale or the goods they want to buy. Just going to focus a little bit on forward contracts. So like I said before, it's somewhat common in the avocado market, not so much, but say I'm an avocado grower, I can grow 1,000 kilos of avocados over the next 3 years. A big buyer at Kirkland Signature, Costco, will approach me. Maybe they're pricing avocado oil, so I sign a contract. Right now, even the ability to find contracts is difficult. And then two, if I'm looking for a particular price, as soon as I say I can grow 100,000 kilograms, I'll often get whittled down on the price by the buyer. So in 2008, in Denmark, the sugar beet industry was in a tough spot where there's only one sugar beet processor and about 100 sugar beet growers. And so this is 2008. And so some researchers implemented a spec of a encryption protocol called multi-party computation, which essentially allows people to create and engage in a double-blind auction without creating or having a central authority to be trusted. So really simply, we can imagine a scenario where we have multiple avocado farms who are all growing different avocados at different prices. We have multiple buyers who can afford to buy avocados at different prices. Everyone submits their prices and quantities into the system, and then once there's a match, they collaborate and corroborate and connect. So kind of our main focus right now is creating a standard for this, specifically within forward contracts. We're working with the Data Food Consortium and the Open Food Network to do so, because it's pretty important. So I'm going to stop there and pass on to Drew.
Sure. Would you like to? I'll do it. Okay. Thank you, Colin.
Well, it's a lot of pretty amazing speakers and projects, right? That's cool. Rob, you kind of stacked the deck because like these folks are doing it right. And I was going to talk about the challenges that I see out there and a lot of people doing wrong. Because we're talking about open source and in creating a vibrant open source community that really makes a difference. I don't know about you, but I only have so many trips around the sun left in me. I want everyone to count. Right? So in the last couple decades, I've failed a lot. Serial entrepreneur, a couple of them worked out. But I started as an electrician, right? Grew up in houses and cabling automation systems and security and fire systems. Turned that into a data and internet company in the .bomb era. Didn't quite crash, grew that to 10,000 daily active users across the fiber optic network that serves a rural farming community up in the Pacific Northwest. Providing voice, video, and data services, cable companies and franchises. Grew that up and exited into a data company one day when some farmers had to fill out spray records. They wanted to make better decisions on the farm, and they had data companies in California. Sorry, you guys are all right, but so you Californians are coming up here selling us software, and the first thing you do is take ownership over all our data. We're going to have it, so they built their own. And we did it differently. We were also a cooperative. There was a great structure, and with that cooperative, we were able to get 500 growers and half a dozen packers and shippers and buyers together and figure out what really worked. And made all kinds of mistakes, but over time, through collaboration and iteration, relying on open source and community sourcing of code and knowledge. We flipped that into a merger of 4 companies that eventually grew up to be on 120 million acres in 5 continents, and scaled. I exited that here this last spring. But over the course of that journey, I always felt that we had to give back, right? Give back to the community, give back to the industry. So I was involved with a number of projects, which I want to talk about today. Which will hopefully, if I land the plane on this thing, I have to keep me honest here, Rob, is really help provide some insight as to like, what can we do as open source communities to really make a difference at scale? Right. So it's one thing to make an impact, but it's another thing. Like, how do we make that impact? We make that impact because there's value delivered. There's actually someone that wants to use the useful things that we build, and then they can be used at scale in the market. So they actually get adopted. Otherwise, we're building really cool things which look amazing on the screen, and then they sit on the shelf. Right. So we want to avoid that. And so we'll talk about some things that I've been doing at Purdue, the Open Ag Technology and Systems Center at Purdue. Been there for like a decade, working on really cool open technology stacks of sensors and other data management tools. One in particular has to do with interoperability. Hey, things would just work together. It would make everybody's life easier with managing software and data, right? And then as Colin mentioned, what you said, we got to meet the challenge of overexposing data, right? So what happens if now all of a sudden we're trading data, but we share too much? It could put the seller at a disadvantage, or it could open up attack vectors, as you mentioned, to put the producer at risk. So we built frameworks for this, and they're super smart people and computer scientists and academics that built out these frameworks and tools, and they're still sitting on the machine, right? And they're fantastic. Like, nobody uses. I can't say nobody. That's really not. That's unfair. We do have enterprise solutions, large agribusinesses, but it never reached the impact we truly had hoped for it to. Right. And so a few years ago, actually, Rob and I have been collaborating on this idea, right? So interoperable data in agriculture. How do we actually connect with the people that are using the tools and systems, and understand what their real needs are and how we can deliver that value in a way that they're able to receive the value, and here's a big one, willing to pay for it. Because then that creates the flywheel that allows us to scale that into the market, right? So we just took some lessons from frameworks and tools that are already out there, domain-driven design, right? Human-centered design. Let's actually get the people in the room, let's talk to them, and let's iterate through the process, much like what we shared here today. Like I said, we got people on the panel that know what they're doing. So there's a couple projects that we've done in collaboration with our open source center. Is we partnered with industry associations, right? So collection of the stakeholders, and then also standards organizations. At the end of the day, the things that get used in business typically have a standard, and there's some compliance hammer that comes with it. Thou shalt do this, or you're not going to get paid. It tends to be a real good motivator. So if we want to make differences, where we work is in those two areas. And we have two projects going on. One is called the Supply Chain in the Future. And what we did is we designed a program series, and the Open Source Center is facilitating much of the technology behind the scenes. But on the front end, it's really about getting all the stakeholders together. And we're going to kick off with an event storming session. Has anyone done an event storm before? A lot of sticky notes blasting through the room, all different colors. It's super engaging, a lot of fun. Everybody gets off their chair and they're like, who's doing what? What do they want to get out of it? What's the data they're using to try to make that decision? What's the outcome, right? And we run through this like intense all day course. And what's brilliant about it is like the whole wall is just covered with these sticky notes, but there's all these clusters and feedback loops and friction points. And you start to really understand where the challenges are that people truly want a solution for, and one that they're willing to solve together with you. And so after that day, we bring in the engineers and coders, the tech folks. They participate, more as observers and facilitators that day. And then the next session is hackathon. So here this winter, we're going to take what was learned and designed by the community of stakeholders, and then we're going to hack on it. We're going to build useful tools, and we're going to drive that out into a program project series this summer, sponsored by other industry actors. So we have growers and shippers and retailers involved, and they're going to actually put that code into practice with proof of concepts and pilots in industry, culminating in a demo day coming up about a year from now at the global show. So the idea is that the open source piece is weaved into that whole series, but as facilitators, observers, as people that can bring that feedback back to the screen and code, and then actually put it into practice in the field. So that's pretty exciting. The other program that we're working on is with the International Fresh Produce Association's Climate Smart Partnership for Climate Smart Commodities grant. It's a lot of words. It's the $4 billion in USDA put out for climate smart. So we're working with several of those programs. And what do you know? The same kind of things came up. How do we collect useful data in the field, right? How do we understand its true impact? How do we deal with data sovereignty and data privacy? Like every one of those programs have those same core issues. We go back to our open source center and they're like, well, hey, we have these utilities around data interoperability and data sovereignty. Why aren't they being used by these people who have these problems? So, so as an industry association involving anyone that buys, sells, trades, or grows produce everywhere in the world, we figured, well, we have some influence to make a difference here. So we decided to not choose a tech partner, but we brought in a venture-backed technology company, a publicly traded technology company, and a startup technology company, and then a academic partner. And we said, hey, all of you should collaborate around an open source framework for climate smart data and how you would share that data and how you would manage the security around that data. We don't want any one of you to call the shot. We want you all to work together. You come up with your findings, publish it open source, and make it available for the entire industry to use, so that every other technology partner or person with an idea or some innovator can use that framework to participate in this very lucrative potential. So they grumbled and they bitched and they moaned and they said they can do it better on their own. And we said, fine, see you later. Guess who's writing the check? And so ultimately, some innovators came, or some companies realized that open source is an opportunity and that siloed data is not the way of the future. They came together and now we're doing it. So the Open Source Center is facilitating the conversation, helping to understand the real practical challenges of implementing these frameworks in real life because we didn't think of everything. And we're partnering with these technology companies that arguably will manage 80% of the data in produce, at least in certain aspects of the supply chain.
Drew, can I want to clarify.
Yeah.
So you have, so the $4 billion the USDA put out, I think there were about 100 awardees.
Yeah, there's only 100 projects.
So there's 100 projects
15
and
100 billion.
and each one of them is, if they are collecting data, they're doing it in their own silo, their own format. And so what you're trying to do is create a lingua franca for all of these, you know, a common language for all these projects so that they can collect that data and then they can determine how they want to share that data, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So well said. So very nice. So we're trying to offer these tools so that you're not prescriptive of how they want to do their job, around provide the framework that they can do that. So these are examples of how open source isn't about the code, right? So I think that the idea to share that I hope to convey today is after years of building code and frameworks, it's super useful. I think useful things don't get used unless they are adopted by business and they can scale. And the way to do that is to engage those communities in ways that they understand and they can justify those business models, provide the funding and the resources. Which there's even more projects. I don't know if we were going to talk about some of the programs coming up. Did you want to introduce the CASA?
Yeah. You want to do it or me to do it?
No, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, so fundamentally, and I think Colin, you may know about this too, but one of the things that we've identified is we have, again, all of these remaining challenges in Agrifood. And we have 150 different incubators, accelerators, and venture support organizations globally for Agrifood. And it's the same sort of thing. I mean, Colleen, I would say that if I look at these incubators, maybe 24 soil sensors have all been out there trying to get VC money. And how many have succeeded? This is 0, right? And so we need a different way of innovating. And so what we've been scheming on and about to launch, it's got the sexy names of COSAC, but we're calling it the Catalyst for Open Source Sustainable Ag and Food. And so fundamentally, what we're talking about is there are these ventures or enterprises that aren't trying to, ring the bell on Wall Street or be the big unicorn, but they're a critical need to solve an agri-food challenge. And this is not part of this catalyst, but just as an example, down at Cal Poly, there's something called the California Strawberry Center. And they actually got industry together and came up with a bunch of open source solutions that aren't going to create a lot of money, but they're necessary building blocks for the Strawberry Center to address their challenges. And I think what we're looking to do is just go rinse and repeat, find those common utilities, tools to go make these enterprises or these ventures succeed more rapidly and more broadly.
I had nothing else. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. All right.
Questions?
Well, I had one thing so we're gonna have a little dialogue up here and then we'll kick it open to you guys. So you were talking about, Colin, you're talking about zero knowledge. Drew, I know from your work with Purdue Open Ag Technology Systems Center, you've talked about confidential computing. We're talking one and the same here. And is confidential computing, is that a term you guys are all familiar with? A couple of you? Yeah. Can you just explain a little bit about what is confidential computing and how that is or is not the same?
You were reaching for the mic.
I was going to hand it to you.
Oh, yeah, you know, there's a common challenge in business that I want to share my data with anyone without sharing it with everyone. Right? And if I have information that I want to share to attest a claim, I often have to back it up with a lot of data to substantiate the claim. And that data there is the challenge because it could also put my business at jeopardy, right? So an example of that is, let's say I want really fresh produce to the grocery store, and so I can share information about what's showing up and when, so they can schedule that to the shelf. Well, that's great in terms of logistics, but it doesn't help with freshness and reducing food waste. If there was other information that I could share, like where it came from, and its harvest dates, and temperature, and the volume, and how it was handled, then we can do things to reduce food waste and improve freshness. The problem is if that information goes from the logistics side of the company to the buyer side of the company, it all of a sudden can be used to put downward price pressure on that seller. And now all of a sudden they're trying to do good things for the world, and they're actually running themselves out of business. Similar to the example that Colin said. So where zero knowledge is, and I'll do my best to explain it, where we have a black box, and you put the data in that black box, and you have the questions you want to ask of that data, and you put those questions in the black box, and the only thing that comes out is the answer to your question, right? So it's the way that it was agreed to be presented by the buyer and the seller in this case. And so their data is secure from being mined or used for other purposes. And even your questions are secured from people not understanding the strategic intent of your questions. So both parties are able to fully trust one another without having to share all of the knowledge associated with that. So when we put it down.
Yes, and agriculture is notoriously slow to adopt tech, right? Like Rob's slide showed that. And one of the bigger elephants in the room is that the vast majority of pricing data, especially institutional buyers, is considered as intellectual property, and there's a fiduciary duty to protect that IP, right? So that's one of the most interesting things about these multi-party computer, these CK systems, is that we really haven't had the technology until now to have crypto management, key management at scale in a way that's actually farmer friendly. And actually allows for agriculturalists to engage in these systems along with industry, along with buyers. And this is my biggest critique of the regenerative agricultural movement. There's no talk about regenerative finance in there. Finance is the root and the mother of all industry. And so I think that's a commonly overlooked situation that touches everything. And that's obviously a big challenge in open source. So,
Colleen, I wanted to, you mentioned the average farm size in the US is 450 acres, but if we actually look at it, we've got the big, I think it's something like, don't hold me to it, but there's 200,000 farms that produce 80% of the ag value in the United States. And then we've got this long tail, right? One of my concerns when we talk about technology and AI is the digital haves and have-nots. How do you see that? Obviously, you're working on it, but do you have that same concern?
Yeah, definitely. And especially around this region of California, there tend to be a lot of smaller growers. So you're talking about the mega farms and they jack that way up. And then around here, you know, the farm on campus here is 30 acres. I visited a farm the other day. It was about 100 active acres. So these are smaller in scale, still challenging to scale up to. It's not, you know, your backyard. So you're not producing the same sorts of volume. You don't have the ability to absorb risk and invest in new technologies. And if it doesn't, you know, work out, then it's no big deal. And a lot of ag tech previously has been directed towards these larger farmers, where the business model has been selling an end-to-end closed source solution. So instead of buying a sensor or sensor network, you're buying the whole kit and caboodle, including the data streaming service. You know, they build out the wireless network for you, they host it, et cetera. And those come with the commensurate price tag. You know, that paired with, you know, it's not to say that there's not been any innovation in kind of the smaller corners of the market. There definitely have been products, you know, that have been designed to, you know, be accessible to these smaller scale growers. But one challenge, you know, I have a collaborator at Santa Cruz RCD. RCD stands for Research Conservation Districts, and they're tasked with kind of working with the local farm community and figuring out how these farmers can continue to, you know, make ends meet while protecting the natural resources like groundwater and such. And Santa Cruz RCD says that one of the biggest challenges, I'll use irrigation management as an example, is, you know, there's this cool company that, you know, maybe it's a startup or it's a new business unit. They decide to create this, you know, new solution. They, you know, the farmer can afford it. They go out and buy it, and it works great. And then, as you mentioned, the profit margins in ag are slim. It's a pretty difficult market to get into as a, you know, and so you have these wonderful dreams as a company, and then you're not, you know, making quite enough money from this, you know, new sensor. So you fold or you get rid of the business unit. Now this farmer has this device that's basically a brick. So I think there's a really nice opportunity for open source in that space, which is if, you know, it's not necessary, and maybe I'll hand it to you afterwards, but I don't think it's necessary to be closed source and be a company and make a profit. There are examples of many companies that have been built on top of open source. If you make an excellent product and do excellence, you will succeed as a company. You know, I think in particular of Arduino as an example with their, you know, open source stack. You know, anyone can kind of take that and license that design and use a competitive marketplace, but Arduino company has been successful at what it sought out to do. So can we kind of open up some of these niches and find a way to innovate while making sure that farmers are left with something where, you know, if one particular company holds, you can kind of take this open source base and run with it and kind of, you know, and not lose everything.
Yeah, maybe I'll share a few comments on two themes here. I think just on the economics of farming and how that's resulted in, you know, essentially concentration of our, you know, like the farm ecosystem amongst that 200,000, you know, large growers, and then, you know, what the role of open source can be. But what we see at Farm.G, our overall thesis is that the agricultural markets over the last 30 years have essentially been optimized around essentially yield. You know, how do we create with as, you know, low cost as possible the highest amount of output. And that has resulted in farm systems be designed around, you know, some mass applications of inputs, because, you know, the data shows that we can get more yield out of that. It is also, you know, essentially resulted in the push towards larger and larger farms where you can get the economies of scale of large equipment across more acres. And that has all resulted in a system in which, you know, we do optimize for yield, but it's come at the expense of the environment in terms of the inputs that are now put into the soil. It's come at the expense of small farmers because they can't afford that $5 million 9R John Deere tractor. It's come at the expense of the quality of our food, like the diversity of our food, the microbiology of the soil. It's the nutrients that we get from the growth of our food today is not like it was, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And so we see an opportunity to lower the cost for the small farmers by using essentially smaller equipment that's intelligent, that's smart, that's precise, that can essentially a swarm of robots, let's say, can perform the same task as a $5 million John Deere tractor, but it can then scale to the based on the number of acres that a farmer might be managing. And so a small farmer might have let's say 20 to 50 acres, 2 or 3 robots, while row crop farmer in the Midwest might have dozens of robots performing a particular task. But each of the capex required to then have that support, that precision on the farm is commensurate with essentially the size of that farm. And so, but to enable that type of future, you need to build a platform that, with new tools, with new capabilities, with new ways of doing things. And that can't happen with one company. That can't happen in a closed source kind of methodology. That can only happen when you bring together a large community that's rethinking how we do practices, with now new, the modern day technology, and as a given, or as the foundation to those practices. And so what we see is through maybe smaller robots that are kind of more open, more modular, that can facilitate the development of innovation and new applications, new ways of doing things. That will empower small farmers, enrich the rural communities with more power, through essentially giving them more economic power, as a result of now having new equipment that empowers them in this system. And it also would then facilitate better stewards of our land. We can we can perform farm tasks in better ways. And I don't think that one single company can do that. It's going to take a big community and a combined R&D effort, that can only happen if there's a kind of a bent towards a more of an open collaborative approach, and that's kind of our philosophy at
Excellent. So let me throw it over. Anyone have any questions? All right, and I'll just say one thing. We kind of talked about soil. We talked about supply chain and the store. We haven't talked about the stomach. And so, like, when we look at food nutritional information, I am shocked. Somebody's been in the space for 10 years, how little we actually know about, for instance, the micronutrients in the food that we eat. I thought we knew much more, and then we don't really know that much about the interaction between food and human. So if Drew and I were to both eat a Twinkie, how would what reaction would that have in our bodies? We're still at the 101 stage on that. And so, again, that's a massive amount of information. We need more open source and more data sharing on the collection and the sharing. Yeah.
I'll stand up since I'm all the way back here. Hi, everyone. I'm the Ember Sword. We're all friends here. You can call me Vicky. I'm the relatively newly minted head of open source strategy and open collaboration at Semios, which I believe a few of you up there are aware of already. For everyone else, we do AgTech. And I'm also an advisor for the Open Robotics Foundation. So I'll probably want to talk to all of you after this. So one of the things I have found in my more than 30, I don't even want to count anymore, more than 30 years in open source and working with dozens of different companies in so many different industries, is as you were speaking to the end user as an open source practitioner and strategist, you always have that moment where you are presenting them with open source for the first time. Now, all of us here, we're all preaching to the choir. We all know exactly what sort of value we can get from businesses, for farmers, for every industry from open source and what it already is doing for our entire world. But when you are introducing it to farmers, how do you do that?
Who wants to take that one? Colin?
It's a good question. A few ways, right? So, maybe I'll ask, or I'll answer one way, and it's not totally open source. But I was talking to a farmer about the cooperative, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I have to join another cooperative. Like, I have to be an admin on this cooperative." So I feel like it's just good design to think about, like, everything on we designed for farmers is like dirty thumbs touching a big device and very small device in the field. And there's a way to communicate that, which is a lot of showing and not telling. And I think the values, and you can get away with the structuring companies in a way that portends the benefits of open source, if that makes sense. So the way that I'm communicating to this farmer that they can use this to soon to be released multi-party computation tool that they can actually trust, because farmers are incredibly discerning and super innovative. And typically, especially in the organic space, I'd argue more distrustful of institutions. So that's the biggest benefit that I think open source espouses to, when I speak directly to them, is that this lack of trust or the engender of trust to them. Yeah.
That's really well said. Nice to meet you, Nikki. You know, when we talk about open source with farmers, we generally don't talk about open source. Like, we talk about the value. You know, here's what we're trying to accomplish. And oftentimes, the challenge comes up, well, I don't know about sharing this information with the wrong people, or how do I know if they're going to go out of business, or if I make this investment, you know, I don't want to be the first one to make all the mistakes in the bleeding edge. I'll let my neighbors bleed. So there's a lot of those kinds of questions. And so I just related back to the coffee shop. It's like, you know, how do you guys share information now, right? And share knowledge and technologies and feedback on those technologies. It's usually in a coffee shop with people that you trust, right? You lean up against the bench, you have a conversation about it. Well, that's what open source is, right? And open source de-risks those challenges around what happens if this company goes away. What happens if my particular interests are slightly different than yours, and I want to pivot, or I want to fork this in another direction. You can do that with open source, just the same as you can do when you have these casual community conversations. So I think open source is actually very natural for the agricultural community. It's not about the tech; it's about the community.
I want to bring up something you said too, Rob, and to Colleen as well. You know, the concept of next generation sequencing or genetic sequencing has really only been, like, high throughput sequencing has only been around for like 20 years. So the effect on, like, especially glyphosate, like even in ag school 10, 15 years ago for me, wasn't even taught about how glyphosate affects the shikimate pathway, which is found in fungi, bacteria, and plant cells, but not human cells. But of course, bacteria outweighs us 10 to 1, right? So I just curious about your thoughts on Rob's question about when we'll see more high fidelity nutritional composition based on your guideline. Maybe not when, but
I can't say a lot in substance about it, but I am a reviewer. But I've been a reviewer a few times for the USDA. They have NEPA, where people submit competitive research proposals, and they have a couple of tracks kind of focusing on ag tech. And there definitely are proposals that have been focusing on how do you take some of these high throughput sequencers and, you know, make it field adaptable and things like that. So there are people, you know, trying. You know, I don't kind of get the memo on who gets funded, but I know there are people trying to do that sort of research out there. And then it kind of comes down to the classic question of how long will it take to translate results generated in an academic environment to something that is impacted in the real world. That can take, you know, kind of at best, maybe 10 years to 100 years.
yeah. I'll just say, two more questions. We're gonna wrap up. A great book to read on this topic is from David Montgomery. It's called What Your Food Ate, and it basically pierces soil health, plant science, food science, and human health.
I teach a class called Data Science and Practice. And we have about 20 teams of master's level students that are mid-career professionals. And we put them together to address a problem. And one we chose this year was to create kind of a hyper-local farmers almanac type thing, kind of the coffee shop that you're talking about, where best practices, local variety, all the kind of knowledge sharing that they may be open to, strains and things. And if you're enthusiastic, creative, and a mutual, I want to talk to you about participating.
Excellent. All right, make it a good one. Let's give you our last question.
Okay, so I'll make also a short one. So we looking from the point of view of open source, there's a hardware open source, there's a software open source. So how you make a case, let's say for so I'm working on this architectics, robotics stuff, and then there is a kind of with the Center for Dermatology here at UCSC. So we have kind of a sort of have a challenge. We have a sort of like a product, something useful and works and stuff like that. And then the question is, how you try to figure out how to make like a continuous, like permanent research activity on ag tech for small farmers and etc. So my question is, how you actually go around like making it or like maybe presenting that ideas to investors and actually to have them bind into like providing resources for making that research in a way that returns value for them, but also like make our work here possible. Shortly, how you approach the investors with the idea of an open source in a software part, I don't know, whatever you want to do.
I'm going to make one comment. I may never be invited back to this campus, but if you look at the dollars spent on academic or agricultural research, so many dollars go to land grant universities across the country. And I was talking to somebody from Cornell who wanted to write a piece to take pot shots at all these incubators and accelerators, and the wasted money there. And I said, you should hold up a mirror to the academic institutions because you have so much that is research. And to Drew's point, it dies on the vine. It just goes and collects. Cornell, for instance, got a grant to do ontologies for 42 different kinds of crops. It just sat on the professor's desk. It never got out into the world. And so this is when we're talking about this catalyst, it's the question of how do we actually get it off the desk and into the real world? Yeah. So that's I hope
well, there is a follow-up of that in the final, obviously university get funding and there's an SF and things like that. But for example, you have to be aware that when it comes to research funding of faculty, there's a clear distinction that like all of these agencies ask us to change the state of the art. And the state of the art is very different from what they call it, the state of the practice. And I'm afraid that here, for your comment, we are here on coffee shop in discussion. We are speaking about changing of the state of the practice, not of the state of the art. So it's like, just to say that's a part of that conversation.
Yeah. You're not going to hit me, I mean.
I have 5 words, main viewpoint, which is, I think a lot of what goes into taking research and bringing it to the greater world is part of what Stephanie stated on here at OSRE. These types of initiatives are essential, and that's all I'll say.
So Dan, it's a good question. I mean, I think this is the tension with open source and ultimately building an art-based venture funded startups that, its purpose is intended to create value. ultimately what you do have to find, you thread the needle on, where, what do you choose to monetize versus what do you choose to, make available and for what reasons? In our case, so no, business that is intended to be, essentially profit driven and ultimately value driven can just give away everything. We have to have a viable business model to exist. We would not be able to raise capital if we did not have a viable business and able to essentially monetize the R&D investments that we're making. In this case with our robotics platform. But the way that we view open source, it's essentially an accelerant towards our goal, and our goal is to essentially modify, upgrade the form factor that's used on farms, to grow our food in healthier ways, and healthy is defined in many ways in me, but we'll go into that over lunch here. And so what we see is by making the business more open, we encourage a community to build on top of that open platform, which in turn creates more demand for that platform, which then in turn creates more innovation. And so for us, it's about increasing our install base, increasing the mind share that goes into building solutions in the agricultural market. And so the business model that we've communicated is about getting the install base into market and getting innovation to kind of be built on top of it. And then there's different kind of ways that you monetize that. For us, we make certainly our robotics platform we don't give away for free. We charge for that. We make most of our software completely free and available to use, but then there is specific pieces of our software that then we charge for, and then what we choose to charge for kind of follows this price discrimination model of we price the components of our software that are geared towards the market participants that have the capacity to then pay for that piece of software. And so basically we charge for the software that provides tangible ROI, for the end consumer. And so, then in that particular case, there's a lot of comfort around kind of then, paying a subscription model or paying for the development.
All right, Drew, you want to last comment?
Sure. It was really well said, quite articulate example of just communicating value and using a clear business model, right? You've obviously spent the time with the business model to understand, what are the sensitivities to that model? How do you develop hypothesis and experimentation methodology for de-risking those sensitivities? But you're not alone. Like I've talked to so many projects that have the same challenge. In fact, we were just up at the decentralized web event up in the Redwoods, and there was like 550 of us. You were there, Colin, and all these open source technology groups, about 40 of us from Food and Ag, wonderful technology. And they're like, I'm trying to communicate the value and get resources and funding to help scale this. And so we came together, and we have some partners that came in and funded facilitation of you've probably seen things like Strategizer or Lean Business Canvas. There's another one that I use and I just absolutely love called Innovation Accounting. And it's helped me to actually not move forward on projects, more so move forward on projects. But it starts with exactly what you're saying. How do we get to a business model? You're either going to measure your revenue, your margin, or your impact, right? And they're all just fine. It depends on what that approach is. But you got to understand, like delivering the value to the customer, we call it value stream mapping. You take that, you turn it into a funnel where you understand what's the probability of taking people from beginning to end, and then you model it. You use statistical analysis to identify like what's the probability of success, what are the sensitivities. At the end of this like 6-week journey, and you can actually do it shorter if you wanted to, but 6-week course, you're going to have a functioning model that you can test, and you're going to have the sensitivities that you can develop experience around to determine whether do I pivot or do I persevere. And to your question is, how do you engage investors or resource partners? Is you bring them this information and show them that you haven't got it figured out yet, but what you have is a model for continuous improvement and iteration to get there, and you're asking for their support along the journey. That's right.
All right, we have to call it a day, unfortunately. Thank you for the great conversation, panelists. I also want to thank Stephanie and the OSBO team for giving us the opportunity. I would tell you, I'm not only excited about the symposium, but also the Oktoberfest, because I'm going to try to get that OSBO team liquored up a little bit and having focus in agri-food. We have 400 different crops we grow here just in California. There's interest in this topic throughout the UC system. And I know that you're trying to get more cross-campus collaboration, as are we. And so that's my secret agenda. And thank you so much.